Kia ora koutou katoa, no mai haere mai. Welcome to Papakainga TV or Home Learning TV. I'm Nathan Wallis and here's my daughter.
Hi, I'm Eva.
Today we're going to have a look at all of your feedback. You've been sending in feedback, so really grateful for that. Wanted to address some of those questions and concerns. I mean, it's been a long time in lockdown now, so what's on top for you? What's standing out about the experience? For me, quite a positive thing really, is I feel a much stronger connection to my daughter. Wasn't something that I thought we already had a strong connection, but I think the being together solidly for a solid period of time, I've realised you're just not breaking the connection. Instead of being connected and being intimate and then going to work, it stayed for 4 weeks. And I think it really just has, and with other people in the bubble, it's deepened the connection without even trying. So I really have learned that being together does grow brains. You know, that's what's on top for me. So what about you, honey? What's on top for you? Anything in particular?
Yeah, I've just noticed that as well. Because always, like in school and stuff, even the holidays, you'd still have to go to work or I'd go see my friends and stuff. Whereas now we're actually spending like 4 weeks. Stuck together.
Yeah. Right. So there's some good things to come from the lockdown. A lot of the feedback is actually related to just the typical adolescence, really, around how do we get our teenagers to be a bit more cooperative. So maybe if we just start by having a look at that, the teenage brain. When scrolling through your fabulous feedback, I noticed that one of the themes was people just asking in general, how can I get my teenager to be more cooperative, to be more emotionally mature, to focus their attention for longer, to be considerate of everyone else in the family? And the best way I've found to achieve that is to wait until they're about 21. What that means is that we might have to have an understanding of what's happening in the teenage brain in order to have realistic expectations. We can expect those things sometimes from our teenager, but I just thought, a quick explanation of what's going on in the teenage brain might actually help you to interact with that brain a whole lot better. So we've used this brain model before, you're becoming familiar with it now. I suppose I don't want to make this more complex than it needs to be. All I really want you to understand is from a brain point of view, adolescence is this higher brain that controls our emotions, sees things from other people's point of view. That is essentially shut for renovations for about 3 years, smack bang in the middle of adolescence. That's what you experience as adolescents. Because when the frontal cortex gets shut for renovations, that forces the teenager back down into the emotional brain. Now this is the brain they were in when they were, 3, 4, 5 and 6. That was really centre stage development. So that means the brain scan of like a 5-year-old has remarkable similarities with the brain scan of a teenager, because they're both showing all of the activity happening in the emotional areas of the brain and not a lot of activity happening in these emotional control areas of the brain. Now it doesn't mean that your teenager's ability to control their emotions completely disappears. It's a good way to introduce the concept of adolescence that it's shut for renovations, but refine that a bit by going it's shut for renovations most of the time, not all of the time. So, some of the time your teenager's just as good at controlling their emotions as you are, just as good at seeing the future, planning for the future as you are. It's more like it's 90% shut for renovations, 10% of the time it's there. It's not that different for you as a parent, really. You don't live 100% of the time up here in the frontal cortex, always being appropriate, always thinking of consequences, always doing the right thing. 10% of the time, you lose it, you lose your rag as well, you move down into the limbic system. It's just that your brain as an adult is designed to only do that about 10% of the time. So most of the time you are focused on consequences, outcomes, consideration of others. That's called being an adult. But a teenager's brain is designed to do that 10% of the time, and it's your job to turn that 10% into 15%, 20%, 25%. But we can't undo the biology of the fact that it is shut for renovations, and being a teenager is a very emotive time. So don't look at your 15-year-old and think, oh my goodness, what sort of adults are he going to be? Where's his work ethic? Where's his getting out of bed on time? Because those things are up in the frontal cortex, and that will come naturally online. Really, a good trick for you to understand as a parent is the 10% of the time that frontal cortex does turn up, you've got to stop and feed it by interacting with it. So I'd be trying to back out of the fight so much, because if you're fighting with your teenager, you're just feeding their emotional brain and it doesn't need your help. It's already got a turbocharger on it. What really needs your help is that frontal cortex. So when your children are being calm, considerate, showing consideration for their siblings, you want to jump in and give attention then. Feed that part of the brain. It's not necessarily when it's going to suit you, so it's not going to fit into your schedule. You've got to be responsive and wait until that turns up. With my children, it was often about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They seemed to reach their calmest time. So I was going to discuss something with them. That after school time seemed to be the best, calmest, most productive time to have a conversation with them. So because their cortex just seemed to be more engaged at that time. So yeah, there you go. Little crash course on the teenage brain. They are supposed to be emotive. Don't think this is who they're going to be at 32. At 32, they'll have a cortex. What you're dealing with now is the limbic system. So to summarise all of that, you could say the 3 R's of having good mental health for your teenager, or the 3 R's that you can do to help support their mental health. The first R is, of course, going to be relationship. It's really all about quality relationships. So that's always got to be your first priority. The next R would be that routine rhythm. Having that regular routine and rhythm just helps to support good, healthy brain structure. And the third R would be regular and predictable times that your child can check in with you where they will get your full attention. It's not a guarantee to success. It's a complicated job raising children. There is no guarantee. But those 3 things will really help to set it up the best to help good mental health. So remember we talked about the scales last time. So I've divided the brain up now, and I'm going to take this frontal cortex. It's responsible for all the good behaviour that makes it nice to live with, like understanding consequences, controlling emotions. That's here, our frontal cortex. And then the survival brain that's really in charge down the base of the brain. Here's the survival brain. Remember we had those on a set of scales, so you could understand that both brains aren't sort of designed to be aroused at once. They work in relationship to each other, just like scales. So if we want all that good behaviour, we need your child's brainstem to be nice and calm. We've talked about ways to calm that brainstem. Number one way is really you. You have to model that. Children use you as a social referencing point. So think about things like pace. You know, if you are approaching your child at a really fast pace, then you're setting that brainstem on arousal. So calm yourself, centre yourself, and when you are talking to your children or teenagers, try and talk, think about pace and just try and keep it nice and steady so you set a good tone for the conversation. That will help to calm the brainstem. We also talked about the importance of just staying connected and talking to our kids so we get those emotions out of the brain, so that helps to calm the brainstem. So get it out of your head, talk about it. Maintaining a routine. I know we've said this a few times, but can't stress how important that is to the brain and calming that brainstem. The kids have to have regular sleep. We also talked about regular exercise. So that exercise doesn't have to be formal, it can be as simple as dancing around the lounge. To make that release even more endorphins than just dancing around the lounge, try singing at the same time. Singing is one of those things that really does magic things to the brain, and there's very few things we can find that pump as many endorphins into your brain as once as singing. So don't be scared to sing. It doesn't have to be alone in the shower, but if that's the only place you can do it, because singing is really, really good for your brain. Okay, well, to finish off, the other part of the feedback that comes through really strongly is around teenagers and sleep. So that's a topic dear to our hearts as well.
Don't look at me like that.
Lots of issues around just how much teenagers sleep, how late they go to sleep. So some of that is just actually their sleep cycle. Some of it is adolescence. It is normal that teenagers need to sleep for a wee bit longer. Now, your circadian rhythm is regulated by 2 hormones. The one that makes you go to sleep is called melatonin. The one that wakes you up is cortisol. So if I go to sleep at 11 o'clock at night, that means I've got enough melatonin in my, about 10 o'clock I'm yawning, it's building up. By 11 o'clock I want to go to sleep. If I stay up till 12, I fall asleep on the couch because I've got so much melatonin in the brain. And then cortisol wakes you up. So, if I wake up at about 6:30, then cortisol's building up slowly, and so there's enough in there at 6:30 to wake me up. That means if your teenager used to have enough melatonin to fall asleep at 11, if it's going to move back 2 hours, they're not going to have that same amount of melatonin until 1. And then if they used to have the cortisol to be able to wake up at 7:30 to go to school without much trouble when they were 10, now they're not going to have that much cortisol until 2 hours after that. So yeah, it is normal that the circadian rhythm moves back 2 hours, and it is normal that they need to sleep a wee bit longer. But having said that, it is also important that they get sunlight on their eyes. That regulates your mental health. It's just good for your brain. You need the sunlight on your eyes. If you're having issues with sleep with your teenager, a good tip is to make sure that when they do go to sleep, their room's completely dark. Often teenagers have so many standby lights and the curtains aren't shut properly. The darker it is, the more melatonin you release, the more likely you are to go to sleep. So yeah, that's one little tip, is make it nice and dark in the room. It also means you need to accommodate. We've had a big thing about co-construction. So Eva has jumped in and volunteered to co-host with me, but she's 21 and sleeps a whole lot more than I do. So it's been about compromise. I would like to film things in their chronological order, but that's not going to work. So we do it where my pieces to camera are filmed first, and then we do our parts together. So that accommodates for the fact that Eva's younger, needs more sleep. It's not a punitive thing. It's I don't need that much sleep. I get 7 hours sleep. That's all I need. A teenager does need a whole lot more. I feel like you want to
12 hours minimum.
12 hours minimum, yeah. But remember, so I'm accommodating to that, but I'm not just going to let her sleep 17 hours. Big long periods of sleep are associated, they're a risk sign of depression. It's really important that we have that rhythm that we've talked about, that routine. So yep, I'll accommodate, but within set boundaries, because sleep is so fundamental to your well-being. So maybe it's not about being punitive with the teenager, but maybe helping them. Rather than fighting about them getting out of bed, maybe it's okay for you to give them mate, you've got to get up in 15 minutes. Mate, you've got to get up in 10 minutes. Mate, you're getting up in 5 minutes. It is easier if they're given, a couple of reminders. I know you're not going to be there the rest of their life to do that, but one day they'll be an adult like us and won't be able to sleep 12 hours, so we don't need to fix that. We just need to help them now. Okay, we've come to the end. Okay, well, a huge thank you and tautoko to all of you for your support, all of your feedback. It's really made it really helpful. And a huge mihi to you, honey, for jumping in and volunteering to do that. It's been a huge learning curve. A huge mihi to all of you, and thank you for your support. Kia ora koutou.
See you later.